It was around this time last year where Ash became free of the curse of the eternal protagonist. I think it's time to reflect on just how much his final major arc played out. I am of course talking about the Masters 8, and how it is a microcosm of everything that is wrong with how Journey set up this tournament arc. In the real world, we are enamored with tournament arcs. Sports, for example, are tournament arcs in a way. While we try to best guess our events on how sports play out using statistics from past games, at the end of the day, fate is not written. The same cannot be said for a fictional narrative where fate has been already written and decided. So what the show does give us is characters and stories to latch onto, and not the end result of a tournament. The joy really is in the journey. A tournament arc can be broken down to two phases, the pre-tournament phase and the tournament phase. Those of you who are familiar with the show by watching it for a long time know about the concept of the pre-tournament phase. Before the characters leap into the arena and start battling in bracketed tournaments, they need some qualifications. And those qualifications are the badges. However, that's not the only thing the pre-tournament phase accomplishes. The pre-tournament phase develops the characters and, more importantly, establishes relationships, specifically the rivalries that will play a role in the tournament phase proper. This is where I believe Journeys falls flat on its face. We certainly have a pre-tournament phase. Ash is shown battling trainers and knocking trainers down in the rankings. The problem is the rivalries. I want to challenge you to do one thing. Name one major rivalry that carried over into the actual development in the tournament phase. To be hard-pressed to find one. You had rivalries and obstacles in the lower classes of the Pokémon World Championship. However, when it came to the Masters 8 itself, the relationship between the Masters 8 are quite scant. Okay, Iris showed up much earlier, and I do welcome that. A former companion turned rival is an interesting direction. However, this isn't an arc, it's an afterthought. On the Masters 8 itself, Iris loses to Cynthia, who in turn gets beaten by Ash. I get having the two of them face each other would be redundant since we did see Iris lose to Ash earlier, but if the losses were a full-on rivalry and the losses were more even, Ash and Iris would have been actually more interesting than seeing Ash versus Cynthia, storyline-wise. Barely anyone in the Masters 8 had a presence in the pre-tournament arc itself, which honestly makes the tournament arc feel hollow because we get so little setup but such a strong payoff, as an intention. Take the case of Alon in Journeys. He shows up, the only thing he does is lose to Leon. He probably has the most egregious case of not having a story presence since we really didn't know he was there until the tournament itself was about to begin, which is just awful. What's funny is that he's the rival Ash was never able to beat, so story potential was there, but nobody actually tried to capitalize on it. You have three things to do in the pre-tournament phase. You have to establish the stakes, which, well, this is Pokemon, there's not going to be any world-busting stakes out here. You have to establish the qualifications, which is the ranking system they had, and you have to establish the rivalries and relationships. Number 3 is where we sort of go off the rails. If you want to establish rivalries and relationships, you either give old characters new motives, or you introduce new characters with new motives. And let's be honest here, the rewatch value of a tournament arc comes less from the spectacle, though that is part of the appeal of a tournament arc, and more from the character drama. I don't think anyone would like My Hero Academia Sports Festival that much if we didn't get the Todoroki family drama. I also don't think Paul would be as welcomed back openly if it hadn't been for the relationship he formed with Ash during the Diamond and Pearl days. That was a very interesting rivalry, and that's why he was welcomed back so readily. And before anyone says the Masters 8 prioritize spectacle, and well, these being the strongest trainers in the world, it makes sense for them to be here, not really. That doesn't have to be mutually exclusive to having story arcs. Not to mention, you could have incorporated the strongest trainers in the world better. We had spectacle when Ash became champion of Alola. That's the first time they did it, and that's the legendary time they did it. But like I say, you get diminishing returns the second time you do something. First time is legendary, second time's the parody. It's like Journeys wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to be relatively standalone, yet they brought a lot of continuity back for older fans. Except you can't have your cake and eat it too in this case. It feels like they were trying to go for a nice middle ground, but they couldn't go for a nice middle ground mainly because, one, they couldn't find the middle ground, and two, this was produced and aired during COVID, so that caused a lot of problems within the industry and around the world as a whole. But those are just my thoughts on the matter. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.